Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank. We come to you virtually from Seattle, the Pacific Northwest, and today we're going down I-5 to California in the Bay Area. Listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, this right here is the podcast for you. I like to call it the podcast of record. This is where street smarts and book smarts collide. I'm Dan Whedon, and I'm joined today by my co-host, the incomparable Linda Popke. Our guest today is Rob Christopher from Just Resolve. Rob is an accomplished litigation and trial attorney and is the founder and CEO of Just Resolve. Just Resolve offers businesses and individuals an innovative and less costly way to settle common disputes. Realizing after years of legal experience that settling common low-stakes disputes takes too much time and often costs more in legal fees than they're worth, he developed NDR. We're going to talk about it a lot today, Neutral Driven Resolution. It's a subject of his new book, Just Right, How Neutral Driven Resolution Can Close the Gap in American Civil Justice. I can't wait to talk. I know Linda knows Rob well. Welcome, Rob. We'll be with you in a minute. Everybody, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and YouTube. Linda, help me out. What are we?
We are ubiquitous.
Next time, I'm going to make you spell that. We come to you from a dozen cities, including Atlanta, Boston, Boca Raton, we're in Knoxville, Columbus. We are in Dallas now. We are ubiquitous. Holy cow. Now, before we bring on Rob, welcome, Linda. How are you doing?
I am fantastic, Dan. How are you?
Well, you know, it's funny. I'm fine. I just got off another podcast where I was the guest. So I finished probably 15 minutes ago, and I was the guest on the show. And a topic came up that made me think, and I thought, I'm going to share this with Linda. They were asking me about, I use metaphor of golf for life. And one of the things that I do is I'm a high school golf coach. I coach the boys high school team here in Paulsbo at North Kitsap High School. And as I'm walking with them and helping them and coaching them, which I'm allowed to do, I'll often ask them, hey, where do you want to hit your next shot from? Especially on the longer holes, because everybody, I want to hit it down there. What does down there mean? How far do you want to be away? Because if you know where you want to hit your next shot from, that's going to influence the club and the direction and everything you use. They liked that. I thought it was kind of fun. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to bring that up here as I think about it as in business and in life. We probably, and I'm going to count me as guilty on this, don't often enough think about where I want to hit my next shot from, what I want to do next. Do you have any comments about that as relates business?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Dan. I think we look at where we are and we can't necessarily see where we want to go. And we need to look bigger. We need to look further. I think it was Wayne Gretzky said, that he tries to get the puck try to look where the puck is going to go, not where it is now. And
Right.
Too often we're looking in business at our own situations. We got to step back, kind of get out of the weeds and look at the bigger environment and what we can do moving forward.
Yeah, and not only that, look, we're so focused not only on ourselves but on the now. And I know being present is important in communicating, but we also need to, if we're making decisions strategically, we've got to look into the future. Now, this is a good segue to bring on Rob. Rob, welcome to the show. First of all, number one is I know you're an attorney. We know that. We also know that you're doing some negotiating, trying to keep people out of costly fees and out of court and all of that. So you're a negotiator too. I got to think that, I've watched enough Perry Mason and I've watched the Netflix show, The Lincoln Lawyer. I know that those folks know in advance the next question they're going to ask, the answer. They know the answer and they know what the question after that is. Am I right? You probably need to know what your next shot is, don't you?
Well, they know it because it's in the script. I know it because I follow a golden rule of a lot of trial attorneys, and that is you don't ask a question that you don't already know the answer to, and what you're going to do if you don't get that answer. it's pretty basic. In negotiations, it's a little different. In negotiations, you explore, you look for common ground, you take more risks, you dare to ask questions that maybe you don't know for sure because you're looking for a way to make progress. And so it's a little different in that context.
So Rob, tell us a little bit about how you got into this whole other area of NDR, what it is, and why is it so important for small business people? Because we have small claims courts, we have courts where you can bring litigation. What's missing in between that?
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking, Linda. And Dan and Linda, thank you both for having me on the show today and be able to talk about this. I got into this, whatever we're going to define it as, because justice is just way too expensive in the United States. I have been an attorney for over 40 years now, and I found constantly throughout my practice that when I was in a case that had less than high stakes, that's not millions of dollars or bet the company or existential kind of stuff, but your normal everyday commercial and non-commercial disputes that people and organizations get into, they almost inevitably cannot earn real and economically rational justice through our litigation system. And that system's not limited to the courts. It also encompasses arbitration and mediation and other what we call alternative dispute resolution or ADR methods that are used to try to resolve legal disputes. I'm a farmer's kid. So I grew up knowing just what the value of a dollar was. I mean, my first job was picking prunes from my grandfather's prune farm, 25 cents a box, way back in prehistoric times. And you grow up thinking, when you or a company earns money, it's not easy. And you don't like the idea of it being stolen from you or taken from you unjustifiably. So I was always focused on the notion of justice and serving justice in some way. Even as a kid growing up, I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to get involved in that part of society. And then as I got into it, I realized, wow, it doesn't work the way it should. The system costs too much. It's not that lawyers are bad people. It's not that the courts don't listen and aren't trying to make better paths, but we have so much regulation, so much due process in the way that we resolve legal disputes today. And there are so many uncertainties, and attorneys are concerned about the risks of malpractice, and the list goes on and on. It is just too expensive, and somebody had to do something about it. And I found myself in the right place and time and with the right combination of experience to take a stab at it.
Rob, as I was preparing for the podcast, one of the things that just popped in my mind as I saw the words neutral driven is, and you work with small and medium-sized businesses that don't always have a ton of cash lying around ready to spend big money. However, it seems like today, and maybe this is recency bias, but it seems like today people are angrier. I'm right, you're wrong, and there's a high level of emotion, and I can imagine even in business that gets flamed, that fire gets flamed, and
yes.
How challenging is it to find a way to work with both parties who both want to get something resolved in kind of that neutral format, or are people not that way in what you found?
No, people are very emotional, and emotion is expensive. Of course, people want vindication and justice, and that's all good. But one of the biggest challenges to what I'm doing, trying to bring sort of a rational, practical, logical approach to resolving disputes, is what I call the rule that it only takes one. In any given dispute these days, you've got at least one party on each side and at least one lawyer on each side. That's 4 people minimum. Any one of those people through irrationality, too much ego, too much emotion, a special agenda, a sense that they're the 800-pound gorilla, can do whatever they want, whatever the reason is. Any one of those people can nix a practical, simple, inexpensive, straightforward way of resolving a legal dispute. And that makes what I'm advocating a challenge.
So Rob, it seems to me if we think about this almost like a fire, we can have the fire extinguisher and put out the fire, or we can do the prevention so we don't have a fire at all. So how, as a small or medium-sized business person, could I get ahead of this and maybe prevent getting into this bad legal situation to start with?
Yeah, well, the best way, whether for both small and larger businesses, but especially for smaller businesses, because the range, the financial range of disputes they're likely to be involved in, more often than not, are not going to be existential. They're going to be common, everyday kinds of things that just literally sap the profits away from their business. One of the best things that companies can do now is, at the outset of any business relationship, instead of accepting the other party's contract or writing a contract with the help of a lawyer that provides for going to court or going to arbitration or some other lawyer-driven process to resolve legal disputes, they can write into their contract a clause, a dispute resolution clause that specifies the process that I have developed and am evangelizing, and that is neutral-driven resolution. I guess I've got to define that, because otherwise nobody's going to know what we're talking about.
Yep.
So, and I call it, it's neutral-driven resolution or neutral-driven dispute resolution. And it is very simply a way of resolving legal disputes that saves time, money, and peace of mind, so much so for both sides or all sides in the dispute that the outcome makes economically rational sense relative to what was at stake in the dispute. The problem we have today is that most common or limited stakes disputes, the financial stakes are eaten up by legal costs, not to mention hidden costs, like all of the time and energy that people have to go through. And the loss of peace of mind, the stress, the relationships that come into challenge. All of those things dwarf the financial stakes in the dispute. And so it just doesn't make sense for us to spend all of that money, time, energy, and stress on these disputes when we could do it faster, cheaper, and better.
So Dan, I just want to ask a quick follow-up. So Rob, if I were to, as a small business person or a larger business person, put this clause in and I get to a dispute, what percentage of the potential legal fee and money might I solve by doing this rather than going to arbitration or court? Can you give us an idea of the scope?
Yes, the scope of savings just in legal fees alone is going to be 4 to 6x.
Wow.
It's in that range. I have a wonderful pie chart in my book, and which I use in the business, which shows that the litigation workload for any kind of dispute, is a pie of certain size. But if you reduce the exercise of resolving it down to a simple search for truth, as opposed to maneuver, advocacy, briefing, hearings, expensive depositions, and all of that, only about 1/6 of the time that lawyers and their clients have to put into a case have to be incurred in that search for truth. The trick is, and what makes NDR work, is that it is neutral driven. Instead of it being a process where competing teams of lawyers who are seeking to win, who are maneuvering constantly for that, instead of those folks running the show, the parties simply agree to have the neutral, that's a judge, for example, or whoever they choose to be their judge. It could be an expert in a certain field. They let the neutral run or drive the investigation and the analysis of the case. And that is the magic. That's what shrinks the total effort needed down to a small fraction of what it is in any lawyer-driven process. Now, you don't need that in a high stakes case where there's millions of dollars at stake and we lawyers are worth the money you got to pay us. And it's not necessary, it's not even allowed in small claims cases where lawyers are not allowed in the room to begin with, and the judge simply hears what the parties have to present and makes a decision. But in all of those cases in between, which really make up the majority of cases people and businesses face in their lives, a neutral-driven process will save them so much time, money, and stress that it makes far more sense, win or lose, to use that process rather than litigation.
Well, we don't want to get into any trouble or have to litigate anything now because we got to pay the bills. Rob, we've got to pay the bills. We're going to take a short break to hear from today's Spotlight sponsor. And when we come back with Rob Christopher for a Hot or Not section of the show, we're going to find out what Rob thinks of garlic ice cream. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Does this sound like you? I'd love to write a book, but I just don't have the time. In fact, I'm not sure where to even start. Maybe you have a compelling story to share or valuable advice for clients and prospects. If only you could get that story out of your head and into a published format. Think you don't have time to write a book? Think you aren't a good enough writer to get your message across? Think this all sounds too overwhelming? Think again. At Leverage to Market Associates, we help aspiring authors transform that long-stuck book idea into an attractive published work. If you've written most of your book, we can help edit your work and drive it through the production process. If you're not sure where to start, we'll coach you through the creative process to organize your thoughts and create a compelling book outline. And if you're just not comfortable writing a book yourself, we can ghostwrite for you. Contact Leverage to Market Associates for a complimentary evaluation of your nonfiction book concept today and bring your book to life.
All right, we are welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we're interviewing the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and the West Coast today. I'm Linda Popke. Our guest today is Rob Christopher, and our next segment is Hot or Not.
All right, Rob, Linda and I are going to pepper you with questions about life, about business, about legal stuff, and maybe a little bit about garlic, as you're about to find out. And you're going to tell us whether the topic is hot or not, and why or why not. And I'm afraid at the end you win absolutely nothing, but we hope you have some fun along the way. So listen, I don't know if you're a fan of the classic Frank Capra movie, It's a Wonderful Life. If you are, you will remember Mr. Potter, the Lionel Barrymore character, talking about the calamity of playing nursemaid to a bunch of garlic eaters. Well, I am a professed garlic eater. I'll put garlic and garlic powder on almost anything. My wife, Barb, will tell you that. And in doing a little research on you, you've got a little garlic in your background. I'm guessing you're a garlic eater, and I want to hear more because I love garlic and I love ice cream. Hot or not, garlic ice cream.
Garlic ice cream is hot.
Yes, I can't wait now. I'm going to have some.
People love garlic ice cream for about 15 seconds. And then after that, they realize they don't want to eat too much more of that. Because all the recipes inevitably are a variation with a vanilla base. And this is what you get at the Garlic Festival in Gilroy, which has been going on for 30 plus years now, with the exception of the COVID times, recent couple of years. And we hope to get it going again soon. But garlic ice cream has this great wild garlicky flavor that hits your mouth about 5-10 seconds in, and then you realize it's not vanilla. It's something totally different. It's going to change your life. And if you've got a little cup of it, though, on a hot day, you will finish it because it's kind of different.
That's interesting. So I just want to, for our viewers and listeners, I just want to talk about the reason we are talking to Rob about garlic is you see his last name is Christopher, as in Christopher Ranch, which supplies the majority of fresh garlic to the U.S. and makes that road down 101 driving through Gilroy in the summer smell like garlic. So, but Rob, you've been involved as a family business, and you involved as being the general counsel there. Hot or not, working with family, what does that involve?
Whoa, you know, in some ways, I'm going to say not. Even though I love it, and even though I wouldn't have it any other way. But I remember back when I went to law school and chose to become a lawyer and chose to take my own path. I didn't want to work for my dad, who had founded the garlic business down in Gilroy. He's a great farmer. He was a great role model. He taught me all the right values through life. So that was all good stuff. But I just needed to go my own direction. And I encourage people to go their own direction in life. And it's okay to come back to family, perhaps at some point in time when you've developed some experience and you've sort of learned the ways of the world, and you've learned what it's like not to have that protective parachute and shield over you. I've encouraged my family to do it that way. And yet now one of my sons is back and he's working with the ranch, and I'm so glad to have him doing that.
How cool.
So we're keeping it in the family.
That's great. That's great.
So, before I ask my next hot or not, do take just a few minutes. I mean, Linda shared a little bit about the garlic ranch, but tell everybody a little bit more about it and the history. And just if you would just take a couple minutes to do that, I think people would be interested.
Well, Christopher Ranch was founded in the mid 1950s by Don Christopher, my dad. Today, the CEO of the business is my brother Bill, because I am the maverick of the family who went out into law. But we work together well, and the business has grown over the years by leaps and bounds. We were very fortunate in the 60s and early 70s to catch the wave of sort of the internationalization of cuisine in the United States. More and more people started to understand that being a garlic eater was a good thing. Not only it tasted great, but it's also extremely healthy for you to eat garlic. So we kept growing it. We also grow a few other things like cherries, bell peppers, and onions. But garlic is our principal crop, and fresh garlic is our principal product among the garlic products that we make and sell. We whole peel it. That is, if you buy our garlic in the store, sometimes you'll find it fresh, but it's already been peeled for you. And we use vacuum packing now to keep it lasting longer in your refrigerator than ever before, so it doesn't go bad soon. And we've learned a lot over the years as to how best to deliver the garlicky goodness that it is to everybody in the country who eats garlic.
Well, I'm eager to eat some garlic ice cream now. But so we'll get back to hot or not. If you think this one's hot, I want you to expound upon it a little bit, and you'll understand why. Hot or not, writing a book.
God, that's a love-hate affair. I've got to say it's hot because as difficult as it is, and it took me 3 years to write it, and there's so much that goes into it. I am a lifetime learner, and I loved the learning experience of it. I loved learning more about my subject. I loved learning more about me. I loved trying to learn how to communicate effectively to a reading audience. And it taxes you in every conceivable way. And it's just you and that computer screen or that piece of paper or that walk on the beach where you're looking for inspiration and you're looking for the energy to keep going. But I commend it to anyone who's got the courage to try it, because of all of that learning that comes from it. And then when you're done, and you publish that book, it doesn't have to be a bestseller. It doesn't have to be something, that's going to change the world, but maybe you have changed the world in just a little way for the better. And that really is my goal with the book, is to change the world for the better.
So do us a favor before Linda asks her question. Tell us a little bit more about your book. You've obviously talked about the neutral driven work that you're doing. Talk a little bit about the book, why you decided to persevere and write it, and why it would be valuable, and who's it written for?
Yeah. So I wrote this book for the same reason that I started the business Just Resolved, to promote, evangelize, and administer NDR. And that is because justice is too expensive. The challenge there is that no one's ever written this book before, and it had to be written. Somebody had to put this out to create an opportunity for another process like NDR to be recognized and to be used more in our society when it's appropriate. And there's a lot of bad fits for NDR, but there are a lot of good ones. So the book traces the history of NDR. It tells my story included in that. It talks about what NDR is, how easy it is to implement, where the challenges are in implementing it and creating awareness around it, where you can find it, and all the good it does. Because it's not just a savings of dollars and cents. There's real savings in people's peace of mind and their dignity and the civility with which we approach each other. You talk about people being angry today. Absolutely, they're angry, and we're too angry, and we're too divided. And in legal disputes, we are ultimately divided. We still have to find a way to deal civilly with each other and to understand that we shouldn't be throwing away money, time, and our energy in something that's relatively unproductive for us. It's productive for the lawyers. That's our job as lawyers. But for the rest of us, we need to find better paths forward. And so going to your question about what audience it's for, I did make a huge mistake in my book, and I confessed to it in the foreword, because I wrote this book for two audiences necessarily. This goes nowhere without lawyers becoming more aware of this and understanding how it works and where it is a useful tool for them. Because lawyers are the gatekeepers to all things legal in our society and the way our culture works. But it's also written for, and very importantly written for, non-lawyers, business people, individuals, nonprofits, every conceivable kind of organization. Because I think the impetus has got to come from there. We have to ask questions of our lawyers. We have to tell our lawyers, hey, I heard about this other way. Is that another path forward potentially for this dispute? And even if the other side won't accept it, there are huge benefits to proposing in negotiations doing NDR to resolve a dispute, independent of whether the other side says yes or no, because you learn so much about the other side's real strategy, for example, by their answer and their real motivations. And that will inform better decisions for you.
So I want to say, having worked with Rob and edited the book, I learned a lot as a small business owner. And so it was really quite valuable. And I recommend that that people become aware of this before you get into a legal situation. But Rob, I want to ask you one more hot or not question. You narrated your own audiobook. Hot or not, doing your own narration on an audiobook?
You guys are asking the tough ones. I would say not on that one, because even though, since I'm an amateur thespian, I felt that I would do a better job interpreting my own book and reading it than somebody else. That took a tremendous amount of time, and I was constantly running out of breath, and I had to learn all new technologies. And I know there are some terrific professional readers out there who perhaps after a couple of go-rounds through might have been able to do it themselves. But again, it was a great learning experience. And when you give me a binary question like yay or nay, I'm not sure. With lawyers, a lot of times the answer is it depends, or both.
So Rob, you brought up being a thespian. So you're going to get to think about that because we're going to take a break. And I'm going to tell you why you're going to have to think about it in just a second. We're going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors. But when we come back with Rob Christopher for our famous Plead the Fifth section of the show, and I know you're an attorney, you got one Plead the Fifth, Rob. We're going to find out about your acting career. Don't walk away. We will be back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors, Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, the Kids Up Sun newspaper, BC Fitness Studio, and the Upstart Group. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
Okay, well, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we are interviewing the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area, which today goes down I-5 into California. I'm the co-host, Linda Popke. Our guest today is Rob Christopher. And our next segment, and Rob is a lawyer, so he knows about this, is Plead the Fifth.
And Rob, Lynn, and I are going to continue to pepper you. Maybe we'll be so good we'll be like amateur attorneys. We're going to pepper you with hard questions, which we probably don't know the answers to. You can plead the fifth once, but only once. And at the end, again, you win absolutely nothing other than the joy of having survived Plead the Fifth. So you mentioned being an amateur thespian as I prepared for this. That was one of the things Linda mentioned. So Plead the Fifth, Rob, what was the biggest blunder you've ever had on stage as an actor?
About 3 years ago, I was in Mamma Mia, and I was playing the role of Sam Carmichael, which was the Pierce Brosnan role in the movie. And we were in San Jose Musical Theater. We were doing 10 performances, and it was the 9th performance. I had done pretty well all the way through then, but in the finale of the wedding that takes place, my mind suddenly went blank. The line was not there, the context was not there. And yet you have to stay in character because that's the way it works. And I kind of mumbled through the line, saying something that had something to do with nothing. And fortunately, my fellow actors, which is what we do, came to my rescue. And by saying something in particular, it gave me a way to sort of get my head back around it. And it only lasts a few moments when you do that. But it feels like the entire world knows that you have just totally screwed up. And even though I asked people later, and most people said, I had no idea that something went wrong there. But for me, it was like a heart attack was going to happen at that moment.
Being a performer, I can understand that. It's just scary, and scarier for us. I think you're right. In terms of your book, I want to ask you something different here. Since the book's been out a few months, have you had any associates or peers that were critical of what you're proposing? Because you are trying to change the legal process to a sense. And are lawyers understanding what you want to do, or they say, why is he doing this?
So far, so good. I have not been approached by somebody criticizing my take on this subject and my recommendation to do this. There's a lot of passive resistance because people are not jumping on the bandwagon to do this among my colleagues. But one of the best things happened just the other day. The brother of a good friend of mine who's a lawyer, a plaintiff's lawyer in Hawaii, and he's about to retire, I believe, wrote the nicest, kindest letter to me saying that he just read the book on the recommendation of his brother, and he found it great, and he found it readable, and he found the message to be right. And I have been concerned because most of my background is on the defense side, although not all of it. I've been concerned that attorneys who typically represent plaintiffs, particularly in contingent fee cases, for example, how they would receive this, whether they would just sort of poo-poo it or say, well, that's never going to go anywhere, or I would never use that. And he really caught right away the idea of how he could use it and how it would make sense in cases where the other side was willing also to be rational and straightforward in the way to resolve the dispute that he had with them. So I've had a lot of input like that, but to see it coming from that side of the bar was really encouraging.
Well, Rob, speaking of criticism, it's often said that we can be our own worst critics. You know, I've written about things like the imposter syndrome and different things like that, that we can be overly critical of ourselves. Plead the fifth. What are you, or what have you been most critical about yourself in your own journey?
So not limited to the subject of NDR.
No, yeah, not limited. Just in whether it's your life's journey, your entrepreneurial journey, whatever that is. Share with us something that you've had to struggle with in that.
I've had to struggle with the work-life balance, especially in all my my first 20 years of practice when we were raising our kids. We have two boys, and now we have daughters-in-law and grandchildren, and it's all wonderful. But I had to work, every week, and I had to work a lot of weekends, and I had to work long hours, and I came home tired. I think if I had to do it all over again, I would have found a way to balance it better, because I feel like I missed a little bit here and there. Now, my wife is terrific and helped make up for all of that in the opportunities we had with our kids on the weekends. And yeah, I taught them how to play ball, and we had a lot of fun together. And I hope that they think I have been a great father, but I wish I'd spent more time with them. And I'm really proud of the fact that my sons now with small children are, maybe they didn't want to be quite like dad in that way. And they are spending terrific amounts of valuable time and helping be key teachers to their children at a very early age. That was probably that's my biggest self-criticism.
I think a lot of us struggle with that. Yeah. And it's kind of you have the perspective as you get older, I should have done that. But when you're in the middle of it, it's tough. So I want to ask you something totally different. If you could have a dinner party with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be? And what would you ask them?
Abraham Lincoln.
Ah.
I would ask him if he had to do it all over again, the war, what would he have done differently?
You mean besides not going to the theater that night, right?
Yeah. We're only talking about
that's post-war. Yeah, that was the post-war. Yeah, don't call in sick for the But it's like you had him on a podcast, right? You'd be able to ask him those types of things in a dinner party, right?
Right. What would you change? What?
Yeah.
Would you have sent McClellan out there? Would you have sent Grant out there earlier? Or would you have done this? Would you have done? I mean, wouldn't that be an incredible conversation?
That
It
would
certainly
be interesting.
would.
I'd like to ask him what he thinks of today too, and the whole legal system, being a lawyer and everything going on too.
Can you imagine? You could ask him almost anything and just sit there spellbound with the kind of wisdom that he would ultimately come up with.
Especially if you fed him some garlic ice cream. I think that would you'd have to get him some garlic ice cream at the same time.
I gotta believe he'd be okay with that.
I think so too. Hey, before we head out, I got one more hot or not, or not hot or not, but plead the fifth that we've been asking this second our guests here, kind of our second iteration of. What's your reaction in your mentally, emotionally to the word impossible?
I don't think we should use it. Because we're only going to use it in the context of some challenge that we think can't be overcome. And that's not the attitude we have to bring to life and to this world. Even if, in fact, it is impossible, we can't live like that. And so that's my gut reaction.
Okay. I like that. I like that. Well, Rob, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Shrimp Tank. And for our listeners that want to get in touch with you, learn more about your company and your book, how can they get more information?
Well, of course, they can reach out to me on my website, www.justresolve.com. They can read my book, which also provides contact information for me. And of course, I can be reached by email. And I understand that email is going to be made available, but it's simple. It's rob.christopher@justresolve.com.
All right. That's fantastic. So for all of you, you want to check this out and you want to find out what's going on. And then you want to check out all of our replays on shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle and wherever you get your podcasts, iHeart, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, because Dan,
We are ubiquitous.
we are ubiquitous. And then follow us on our show's social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
So first of all,
Thank you
Rob,
both so much, and Shrimp Tank.
Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed having you on and learning about your book and what you're doing, and the garlic as well. Linda, as always, appreciate you being on. Great to see you again. Everybody else, do exactly what Linda says. Like our Facebook page, because we will live stream this every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific. Next show is Wednesday, June 15th. My co-host will be Phil Simchich. We're going to welcome Jeremy Baker. Jeremy is actually going to help everybody who goes on podcasts like Rob to maximize that from a marketing perspective. So Rob, make sure you tune in next week for Jeremy. That'll be a fun show. In the meantime, please, everyone, be safe, be well, and be prosperous, because until next week, the shrimp, it's back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond.